You are not what my son expected, and you never will be. Get back on that train." Margaret Dawson said it loud enough for the whole platform to hear. Anna Whitmore had traveled 1,100 miles for this moment, carrying 8 months of letters and every ounce of hope she owned, and in 10 seconds, a woman she had never met had already decided who she was. Caleb stood beside his mother and looked away. The crowd closed in. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And that was when a stranger's voice cut through everything. "Miss Whitmore." She stopped walking. "I ain't offering pity. I'm offering you a choice. Be mine. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very last word. Then drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled." The morning Anna Whitmore stepped off the train at Bitter Creek, Wyoming, she was wearing her best dress. It was not an expensive dress. It was the kind of dress a woman sews herself when she wants to look like she belongs somewhere. Careful, stitching along the collar, a small row of buttons down the front, the fabric pressed flat the night before on a borrowed iron in a Kansas City boarding house. She had pressed it twice, actually. Once, because she wanted it right. Once, because she was too nervous to sleep. She had been traveling for 4 days. 4 days of train smoke and hard bench seats, and the slow grinding anxiety of a woman who has made a decision she cannot take back. She had sold her furniture. She had packed 2 bags. She had said goodbye to a life that had never really fit her and climbed aboard a train headed west, carrying nothing but the letters. The letters were in her coat pocket, folded and refolded so many times the creases had gone soft. She had read them so often she could have recited them from memory. Every line, every careful word, every quiet promise Caleb Dawson had put down on paper over the course of 8 months. The land here is honest. That was how he started his first letter. It doesn't ask you to be anything except what you are. She had fallen in love with that sentence before she had ever fallen in love with him. Anna was 26 years old. In 1885, that made her old enough to be considered past the reasonable age for a first marriage. She knew what people said about women like her. She had heard it from neighbors, from church ladies, from her own aunt, who had looked at her across a kitchen table 6 months ago, and said without cruelty, but without kindness either, "Anna, you need to be practical about what you are and what you are not." She was not young. She was not wealthy. She was not connected to any family of standing. What she was, what nobody had ever taken the time to discover, was something else entirely. But that was a story for another day. On the platform at Bitter Creek, she looked for Caleb. She found him immediately. He was standing exactly where he said he would be, near the far end of the platform, tall and fair-haired, in a good wool coat. For 1/2 second, she felt the tight knot in her chest loosen slightly. He was there. He had come. Whatever came next, at least he had come. Then she saw the woman beside him. Margaret Dawson was somewhere near 60, with a rigid back and a face that had made its opinions permanent. She was dressed in dark wool, and she was watching Anna walk down the platform steps with the focused, unblinking attention of someone assessing livestock at an auction. Anna knew immediately. She did not know how she knew. She just knew. She kept walking. "Mrs. Dawson," she said when she reached them, and she smiled genuinely. Smiled because Anna Whitmore had survived enough hard things to know that you did not stop smiling just because something was about to go wrong. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Caleb has written so warmly about this place." Margaret did not smile back. "How old are you?" she said. Not hello, not welcome, not how was your journey. Just how old are you? Anna held her ground. 26. Margaret's chin lifted slightly. "You wrote 24 in your first letter." "I wrote that I was 24 when I wrote my first letter. That was 2 years ago." "That is not what my son understood." "Then perhaps your son should have asked." It came out quieter than Anna intended it to. Not sharp, not defensive, just factual. The way you state something that is simply true. And maybe that was worse in Margaret Dawson's accounting than if Anna had raised her voice. Because Margaret's eyes went cold, in a way that had nothing to do with the Wyoming morning air. "You are not what my son expected," Margaret said. Margaret. She said it loud enough for the people on the platform to hear. And people were beginning to hear things. A porter had slowed down. 2 women near the station door had turned. An older man in a wide hat had taken 3 subtle steps closer the way people do when they sense that something worth watching is about to happen. Anna looked at Caleb. This was the moment. This was the moment when a man either proved himself or didn't. When he either stepped forward or stayed exactly where he was. Caleb stayed exactly where he was. He didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at Anna. He looked somewhere past her left shoulder at a fixed point in the middle distance, the way a man looks when he has already decided something and does not want to be the one to say it out loud. "Caleb." Anna kept her voice steady. "Is there something you want to say to me?" He exhaled. "Anna, don't," Margaret said. "I'll speak for the family." "I'm not speaking to the family," Anna said. "I'm speaking to your son." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight, and then Margaret Dawson filled it. What came out of her mouth in the next 3 minutes was delivered in a perfectly controlled, perfectly reasonable, publicly acceptable voice that was somehow more devastating than shouting. She said that Anna's letters had been misleading, that her age was one concern among several, that a woman who had worked in agricultural research, as though this were a disease, clearly had priorities that were not compatible with the needs of a ranch wife and a Dawson family daughter-in-law. She said that Caleb had been too kind, too patient, too willing to give a stranger the benefit of the doubt. She said it was time for practical people to make practical decisions. She said Anna needed to go back where she came from. And she said all of this on a public platform with people listening while her son stared at the middle distance and said nothing. Anna felt something happen inside her chest. It was not grief exactly. It was not even anger exactly. It was more like the specific, horrible feeling of realizing that you have been foolish, not because you trusted the wrong man, but because you trusted a version of a man that never actually existed. The man in the letters. The man who wrote about honest land and simple futures. That man had never come to meet her at this train station. He might never have existed at all. "Are you going to say anything?" she asked Caleb one final time. He finally looked at her. His eyes were sorry in the way that means, "I am sorry this is happening to you." Not in the way that means, "I am sorry, I am the one doing this." There is a difference. Anna knew the difference. "We cannot marry," he said. I think you understand." "I understand perfectly," Anna said. She picked up her travel bag. She did not look at Margaret Dawson again. She did not look at the 2 women near the door who were no longer pretending not to watch. She did not look at the porter or the man in the wide hat or any of the other people who had gathered in that specific casual way that meant they had decided this was a public event and she was the main attraction. She turned and she walked. Not quickly, not the stumbling, rushing walk of a woman who wants to get somewhere private before she falls apart. She walked at the pace of a woman who has decided that her dignity belongs to her and not to the people watching her, a pace that said to anyone reading it correctly, "I have nothing to be ashamed of." She was almost to the end of the platform when the voice stopped her. "Miss Whitmore?" It was quiet, not sharp enough to cut through a crowd, but it reached her anyway, the way a particular voice reaches you when something in it is different from every other voice in the space. She stopped. She turned. The man was taller than Caleb by 2 inches broader through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had been outdoors in Wyoming weather for long enough that it had settled into its permanent form. He was standing near the water tower at the far end of the platform. He wore a rancher's coat worn through at the elbows. His hat was pushed back slightly. His hands were at his sides. He was not moving toward her. He was simply standing there watching her the way a person watches something with the full attention of their eyes, not the sideways, embarrassed glance of the crowd, but straight on direct. "I don't need pity," she said. "I ain't offering pity." "Then what are you offering?" He said it calmly as though he had thought about it, a choice. Anna looked at him. "I don't know you." "Name's Ethan Cole. I run a ranch about 4 miles north. I've been coming into town this morning for supplies." He paused. "I saw what happened. So did everyone else. Everyone else is going to go home and talk about it. I'm asking you a question." He held her gaze. "You can get back on that train and go back to wherever you came from, or you can hear what I'm about to say." She had no money for a return ticket. She had enough coin for maybe 3 nights at a boarding house if she stretched it. She had nothing waiting for her in Kansas City, except the empty apartment she had left behind and an aunt who had warned her to be practical. "Say it," she told him. "My ranch is struggling. I won't pretend otherwise. I need someone who knows how to work, someone with a clear head." He paused. "I can offer you a fair wage, a roof, 3 meals. You'd have your own quarters. Nothing improper about the arrangement." "You don't know anything about me." "I know you didn't cry," he said. "You could have. You would have had every reason to. You didn't." She stared at him. "That tells me something," Ethan said. She looked back toward the platform where the crowd was beginning to disperse now that the spectacle was over. Caleb was gone. Margaret Dawson was saying something to a woman near the door, and the woman was nodding with the specific nod of someone receiving information they find satisfying. Anna turned back to Ethan Cole. "I won't take charity," she said. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering work. There's a difference." He finally moved 1 step toward her, not crowding her, just closing some of the distance. "My ranch is in trouble. If you can help me fix it, we both benefit. If you can't, you'll know in 2 weeks, and I'll pay you the 2 weeks' wage regardless. And if I find better employment in town before then you take it," he said simply. "I'm not asking you to stay forever. I'm asking you to stay long enough to figure out what comes next." Anna stood there for a moment holding her bag. The morning was cold. The crowd had mostly gone. The train whistle sounded once in the distance, leaving. Already leaving, pulling away down the line headed back east, and somewhere in the last car was the seat she had sat in for 4 days, empty now. "What is it you actually need?" she asked him. Ethan Cole looked at her with the direct, undecorated attention of a man who doesn't talk much and means exactly what he says when he does. "Someone who knows what it means to start over," he said, "and still show up." Anna picked up her bag more firmly. "I'll need to know where your ranch is," she said. The wagon road north from Bitter Creek was rough and cold, and Ethan drove it with the economy of movement of a man who has made this trip hundreds of times. He didn't talk much. She appreciated that. She was not in the mood for small talk, and she was not in the mood for sympathy, and she was especially not in the mood for the kind of conversation men sometimes tried to have with women in distress, the sort that was built on comfort, but angled toward something else. Ethan Cole didn't do any of that. He drove. He pointed out once where the road forked and told her to always take the left fork if she was coming from town alone, because the right fork looped around and crossed a creek that flooded in spring. He said it the way you tell someone information they will need practically without drama. That was all. She looked at the land. Wyoming in November was not the Wyoming she had imagined from Caleb's letters. Caleb's letters had made it sound wide and clean and waiting. This land was wide, certainly wider than anything she had grown up with in Ohio, wider than the flat Kansas farmland she had passed through on the train, but it was also hard, cold, the color of stone and dead grass under a pale sky, the kind of beautiful that doesn't ask you to love it, the kind of beautiful that simply is. She found herself thinking, I could learn to love this kind of country. Then she caught herself. She was not here to love anything. She was here because she had nowhere else to be. Coal Ridge Ranch came into view around a bend in the road, and Anna looked at it and understood immediately why Ethan had called it struggling. It needs work, he said, a statement of fact without apology. Yes, she said. Also a statement of fact. I know what it looks like. It looks like a property that has been managed by one person doing the work of 3. She glanced at him. How long have you been alone here? A pause, longer than necessary for a simple question. 6 years, he said. She didn't ask why. Not yet. They climbed down from the wagon, and he showed her the house. The main room. The kitchen, a small room off the back that had clearly not been used in some time. It was clean at least. Whatever else Ethan Cole was or wasn't, he kept a clean house. "This would be your room," he said. "There's a bolt on the inside." "I noticed," she said. "Thank you. I'll get your things." He went back out to the wagon, and she stood in the small room and breathed for a moment. Just breathed. The morning had been a great deal. She was not going to think about the platform. She was not going to think about Caleb's face, that specific variety of cowardice dressed up as regret. She was not going to think about Margaret Dawson's voice carrying across the crowd. She was going to think about the next hour, then the next day. That was as far ahead as she was prepared to go. Ethan brought her 2 bags inside and set them down without fuss. "Supper's usually around 6, he said. "I'll be outside most of the day. You don't have to work today if you don't want to take the time to settle." "I'd rather work," she said. He looked at her steadily for a moment. "All right, then walk the property with me this afternoon. I'll show you what's what." Jackery. What was what turned out to be more than she had expected. Not just the broken fences and the failing kitchen stores and the barn that needed a new corner post before the winter got serious. Those were things she had anticipated. What she had not anticipated was the systematic nature of the problems, the way the difficulties were layered on top of each other in a specific pattern, the pattern of a property that had been healthy once and then over a period of years had simply stopped being cared for in the way it needed. Not abandoned. Never abandoned. Ethan clearly worked this land every single day with everything he had. But there was a difference between working a property and seeing a property. Working it was what kept you alive. Seeing it was what kept it growing. She walked behind him as he showed her the north fence line, and she was quiet, but her mind was not quiet. Her mind was already cataloging. Water access, soil condition, the angle of the existing pasture relative to where the afternoon sun would fall in spring, the way the barn was positioned to block wind from the north, but not from the west. "You're thinking something," Ethan said without turning around. "I'm thinking a great many things," she said. "Is that a concern?" "No." He glanced back. "Say one of them." She considered. "The western pasture is positioned wrong for winter grazing. You lose heat exposure in the afternoons. If you moved the cattle rotation to include the eastern slope..." She stopped herself. "I'm sorry. I haven't been here a full day yet." He turned fully now, facing her. "What do you know about grazing rotation?" The question wasn't challenging. It was genuinely curious. And something in that genuine curiosity made her answer honestly, more honestly than she had been in this particular area with anyone in a long time. "My father was an agricultural researcher," she said carefully. "He worked on farming methods for 15 years. I assisted him from the time I was old enough to be useful until he died." She paused. "It's not typical knowledge for a woman I know. I don't usually mention it." Ethan Cole looked at her for a long moment. "Why not?" "Because it makes people uncomfortable." "What kind of people?" She met his gaze directly. "The kind of people who have opinions about what a woman should and shouldn't know." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've got old records from my father's time, maps of the property, some notes on the soil water tables. Haven't looked at them in years." He turned back toward the ranch house. "I'll get them out tonight if you want to look them over." "I'd like that very much," she said. That night, after a plain supper eaten mostly in silence, Ethan brought out a battered wooden box from the back of a shelf. Inside were papers, actual papers, some of them 20 years old, drawings and notes in a careful hand. His father's hand, she assumed. She spread them on the kitchen table and began reading. Ethan sat across from her and watched without speaking. She forgot he was there. She was aware of this happening, aware that she was doing the thing she always did when there was real information in front of her, which was to disappear into it completely, but she couldn't stop herself. She traced the old property maps with her finger. She read the soil notations. She found the water table markings and cross-referenced them with what she had seen during the afternoon walk. "There's something here," she said more to herself than to him. "What?" She looked up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not quite surprise, something quieter than that. "Your father noted a spring formation in the North Field," she said. 1872. He was going to investigate it, but then—" She read further. "Then the notation stops. Did something happen in 1872? Ethan was very still. "My father got sick that year," he said. "He didn't fully recover for a long time. The investigation never happened. And after he recovered, other things, always other things." He looked at the map. "I didn't know there was a notation about a spring. You haven't read these papers?" "Not in years." He paused. "Not since—" He stopped. She didn't push. But she looked at the date on the last entry in the box, and she understood. The last entry was from 6 years ago. Whatever had happened 6 years ago, whatever had made Ethan Cole the particular variety of alone that he was, had also put this box on the shelf. "The spring notation is probably nothing," she said carefully. "Most of these old survey notes were speculative. But if there is a water source under the North Field, it would explain why the soil composition is different up there. I noticed it this afternoon. It's deeper, more—" She searched for the plain word rather than the technical one, "more alive than the South Fields." Ethan looked at the map for a long moment. Then he said, "You know more about this land than I do, and you've been here 6 hours." "I know how to read records," she said. "You know the actual land. Those are different things. Could be they'd work better together." She looked up at him. He wasn't making a suggestion about anything beyond the obvious practical meaning of the words. She could see that. There was nothing in his face except a kind of cautious, tentative optimism, the kind a man has who has been disappointed enough times that he's afraid to have it, but can't quite stop himself. "Yes," she said. "They could." Deb. The trouble came on the 4th day. She was in the kitchen when she heard the wagon coming. Not Ethan. He was in the South Field. She had seen him there an hour ago. She went to the window and looked out, and her stomach dropped. Margaret Dawson's wagon. And Margaret Dawson herself sitting rigid in the seat, with a young woman beside her. Anna didn't recognize, and a look on her face like a woman who has decided that a situation requires her personal attention. Anna stood still for a moment and made a decision. She could stay in the kitchen. She could let Margaret come to the door and answer it the way a housekeeper answers a door, quietly, carefully, from a position of acknowledged lesser standing. Or she could walk outside and meet her on the ground. She walked outside. Margaret saw her immediately, and something moved across her expression. Not quite surprise, but the adjustment a person makes when the situation is not exactly what they planned for. "Mrs. Dawson," Anna said. "Miss Whitmore." Margaret climbed down from the wagon with the economy of movement of a woman who has learned not to need help. "I heard you had taken a position with Ethan Cole." "That's correct." "I came to speak with Mr. Cole." "He's working. I can give him a message. I'll wait." "That could be a while," Anna said pleasantly. "He doesn't stop for midday." Margaret looked at her with the specific look of a woman recalculating. "I suppose I'll speak to you then." "I suppose you will," Anna said. "Would you like to come in?" They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Anna had spread the old property maps the night before, and Margaret Dawson looked around Ethan's kitchen with the expression of a woman cataloging everything she sees, filing it away, building a case. "You understand," Margaret said, "that your presence here creates a certain impression." "I'm employed as a ranch hand," Anna said. "I don't think the impression is as complicated as you're suggesting. In a small town, everything is complicated." Margaret set her hands flat on the table. "What happened at the train station was unfortunate. I want you to understand that. But Caleb made the right decision, and I think you know that." "Caleb didn't make any decision," Anna said. "You made it for him." Margaret's jaw tightened slightly. Your son stood at a train station while a woman he had corresponded with for 8 months was publicly humiliated and said nothing. Anna kept her voice level. I don't hold that against him personally. Some people are not built for difficult moments. But let's be accurate about what happened. The silence was very particular. You are a bold woman, Margaret said. I've been called worse this week, Anna said. Margaret looked at her for a long moment. Then, what are your intentions regarding Ethan Cole? To do my job well and earn my wage. Nothing more, nothing more. Because Ethan Cole has been through enough tragedy. He doesn't need. Mrs. Dawson. Anna interrupted not unkindly. I think you came here expecting to find a desperate woman clinging to any foothold she could find. I understand that. From the outside, I suppose that's a reasonable assumption. She paused. I'm not clinging to anything. I'm working. When the work is done, I'll decide what comes next. That's all. Margaret studied her. You are not what I expected, she said. The same words as on the platform, but somehow slightly differently weighted. No, Anna said. I don't think I am. Dud. Ethan came in from the field at sundown and found Anna alone in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a look on her face that was trying very hard to be neutral. Margaret Dawson came by, she said. He set his coat on the hook. I saw her wagon leaving from the south field. He poured himself water from the pitcher. What did she want? To assess the situation. He turned. And what did you tell her? That there was nothing to assess. He looked at her steadily. Are you all right? It was such a simple question. Such an ordinary, direct question. 4 days ago, she would have said, I'm fine, automatically the way women are trained to say it, regardless of what's true. But Ethan Cole asked questions the way he did everything else, without performance, without agenda. Just the plain desire to know. I'm all right, she said. She's not wrong that people will talk. People in Bitter Creek talk about everything, he said. I stopped caring about it some years ago. When he sat down across from her. The evening light was fading outside. When I realized, he said slowly, that the people doing the talking weren't out here doing the work. He looked at his hands for a moment. Talk is easy. Talk doesn't cost anything, so people spend it freely. He looked up at her. You'd be doing yourself a disservice worrying about people who aren't paying your wages or fixing your fences. Anna was quiet. Then she said, What happened 6 years ago? She hadn't planned to ask it. It came out without warning, and she half expected him to shut the question down, to look away the way Caleb had looked away on the platform, to leave a silence that meant, don't go there. Ethan didn't look away. He looked at her directly, and for a moment he didn't say anything at all. And then he said, My wife, my daughter. He paused. Winter fever. It came on fast. Another pause. They were gone in 10 days. The kitchen was very quiet. I'm sorry, Anna said. Yeah. He looked at his cup. People say that. I know they mean it. He was quiet for a moment. Worst part wasn't the grief. The grief, I understood, grief makes sense. The worst part was... He stopped, seemed to be looking for the right word. The pointlessness of it. That it happened for no reason, and there was nothing I could have done differently, and it was just gone. Just gone. He stopped. Anna sat with that. She thought about the letters in her coat pocket, the ones she had believed in so completely, and the platform, and the crowd, and the way something can feel absolute and then be absolutely gone. Yeah, she said softly. I think I understand that particular kind of loss. It was different. She knew it was different. A failed marriage arrangement was not the same as losing a wife and daughter. She wasn't comparing it, but the mechanism, the specific feeling of a future disappearing that you had already built in your mind, that part she understood. Ethan looked at her. I think you do, he said, and that was the moment, that particular quiet, undecorated moment in a kitchen at the end of a long day, that something in the Coal Ridge Ranch stopped being a temporary arrangement and became something slightly harder to name. Neither of them mentioned it. They went back to their coffee, and then to their work, and then to their respective corners of the house. But the thing had happened, and they both knew it, and the knowing sat between them like a small, careful fire that neither one was ready to touch. Outside Wyoming settled into its cold, patient darkness, and the north field lay quiet above whatever was sleeping underneath it, waiting. The small fire between them did not go out overnight. Anna woke before dawn, the next morning, the 5th day, and lay in the dark of her small room listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. The wind off the Wyoming mountains pushed against the walls. Somewhere in the barn, one of the horses shifted and stamped. And from the other side of the house, she could hear Ethan already moving the particular quiet efficiency of a man who has woken before sunrise for so many years that it has stopped being an effort and become simply what morning is. She got up. She was not going to lie in bed while he worked. That was not who she was, and if there was one thing the last 5 days had clarified, it was that she was done being who other people expected her to be. She had tried that in Kansas City. She had tried it in 8 months of carefully worded letters. She had tried it on a train platform in a pressed dress. She was finished trying it. She dressed and went to the kitchen and had coffee ready before he came in from the barn. He stopped when he saw it. Just for a moment, a half-second pause at the door, and then he came inside and hung up his coat and sat down and picked up the cup without making a production of it. "Thank you," he said. "You were up early," she said. "Always am." He wrapped both hands around the cup. "North fence has a section coming down. Wind last night. I heard it." She sat down across from him. "I want to look at those soil maps again this morning, specifically the north field notation." He looked at her over the rim of the cup. "You were thinking about it in the night." "I was thinking about a lot of things." The spring, she confirmed, and the soil composition, and the water table, and the fact that your cattle keep drifting north on their own, which they wouldn't do if there wasn't something drawing them there." She paused. "Animals know things." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that," he said, verbatim, "animals know things." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but the territory adjacent to one. He spent most of his life trying to understand what they knew. Smart man. He was. He set down his cup. "I'll pull the Northfield map after breakfast." Ted. They spread the map on the kitchen table again, this time in morning light, and this time Ethan sat beside her rather than across from her. The difference in position was small and practical. They were both looking at the same document, but it changed the geometry of the thing, and they both registered it without acknowledging it. Anna traced the water table notations with her finger. "Here," she said. "Your father marked this elevation change. You see how it runs. The water would follow the slope, and if there's a formation underneath granite shelf, most likely given what I saw in the exposed rock on the east ridge, it would pool. It would have been pooling for decades." Ethan studied the marks. If it exists. She looked at him. "But look at this." She pointed to the line of soil notations running along the north boundary. "Your father sampled every 100 yards. The moisture content in the north samples is consistently higher. Not dramatically, but consistently. That doesn't happen from rainfall alone, not at that elevation." Ethan was quiet reading. She gave him the time. "What would it take to know for sure?" he said. "Some digging." She paused. "And the willingness to be wrong." He looked at her sideways. "You're telling me there's a risk," he said. "There's always a risk. But the alternative is watching the creek dry up next summer and having no answer for it." She held his gaze. "What do you want to do?" He didn't answer immediately. And she understood why, because this was not a simple question about digging in a field. It was a question about whether a man who had lost everything he loved 6 years ago was willing to bet what remained of it on information he hadn't known existed until 5 days ago, provided by a woman he had pulled off a train platform on impulse. She understood the full weight of the question she was asking. "I'm not asking you to decide today," she said. "I know." He folded the map carefully. "Let me think on it." She was thinking about the map, still thinking, turning the soil data over in her mind the way she turned problems that interested her when she heard the horses outside. More than one. The specific rhythm of riders coming in hard. Ethan was already at the door when she reached it. 3 men on horseback. She didn't know 2 of them. She knew the third immediately. He was built like his mother, upright and certain, with the same set to the jaw that she recognized from the Bitter Creek platform. Caleb Dawson. He pulled up in front of the house and looked at her standing in the doorway, and something moved across his face that she couldn't fully identify. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even the cold dismissal his mother had shown. It was something more complicated and less excusable. The expression of a man who knows he did something wrong and has decided that the best way to manage the knowledge is to make the other person responsible for it. "Ethan," he said, looking past Anna entirely. "Caleb." Ethan's voice was even. "Something I can help you with. I think we need to talk." Caleb's eyes flicked to Anna briefly, involuntarily, like a man checking to see if something dangerous has moved. "Privately." "Anything you have to say to me," Ethan said, "you can say in front of my employee." The word was deliberate. Anna heard it. Employee, not guest, not the woman staying here. Employee, a word with standing, a word with clarity. Caleb's jaw tightened. "People are talking, Ethan. People always talk. This is different. My mother." He stopped, recalibrated. "People in town are saying things about Miss Whitmore's situation here that aren't good for anyone." "What people say in town," Ethan said, "is their concern, not mine. It becomes your concern when it affects the Dawson family name." Caleb sat straighter in the saddle. "We had an arrangement with Miss Whitmore that didn't work out. That's all it was. The fact that she's now on your property suggests a certain desperation that I think everyone would prefer to avoid drawing attention to." Anna felt something go very still in her chest. She had expected this moment to hurt more than it did. She had expected the sight of him, the man who had watched his mother dismantle her in public, and said nothing, to produce something larger. Fury, perhaps. Or grief. But what she actually felt standing in the doorway of Ethan Cole's house on her 5th day in Wyoming was something closer to clarity. The specific, cold clarity of a woman who has finally seen a thing for exactly what it is. "Mr. Dawson," she said. He looked at her with the slight, involuntary flinch of a man who hadn't expected to be addressed directly. "What you had with me," she said, "was not an arrangement. It was 8 months of correspondence in which you described a future you had no intention of providing. And what happened at the train station was not an arrangement failing to work out. It was a public humiliation that you chose not to prevent." She kept her voice completely level. "I'm not desperate. I'm employed. And I'd appreciate you keeping the distinction clear when you're deciding what to tell your mother." The silence was considerable. One of the 2 men with Caleb looked at his saddle horn. The other looked at the middle distance. Caleb looked at Anna with an expression she had not seen on him before, something that was almost not quite but almost respect. He didn't apologize. She hadn't expected him to. "Ethan," he said, shifting back to safer ground. "Just be aware that there's talk." "I'm aware," Ethan said. "Now if you're not here for ranch business, I've got a fence to fix." Caleb held for one more moment. Then he turned his horse and rode. Anna stayed in the doorway until the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then she turned and went back inside to the kitchen table and the maps, because there was nothing else to do with any of that except continue working. Ethan came in behind her. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes." She looked at the map. "You said the north fence needs work. I can help after I finish with these calculations." A pause. "Anna." She looked up. He was standing with his hat in his hands, a gesture she had not seen from him before, the slight, unconscious vulnerability of a man who has removed the hat without thinking about it. "What they did to you at that station," he said. "That wasn't right." "No," she said. "It wasn't. Caleb's a decent enough man when his mother isn't in the room." "I know." She set down her pencil. "That's almost worse, isn't it? The ones who are decent when nobody's watching and then do nothing when it matters." Ethan looked at her for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "That's worse." He put his hat back on. "Fence," he said. "Maps," she said. Then fence. She found the second notation 3 hours later. She had been working through the oldest papers in the box documents. She hadn't reached the first night, buried under more recent records. And when she found it, she sat very still for a moment before she called him. She almost didn't call him immediately. She turned the paper over, read it twice, read the date at the top. 1868. Older than she'd thought. She read the surveyor's notation in the cramped professional handwriting of a man who had been paid to be precise. Significant subsurface moisture indication, north quadrant, approximately 40 feet below grade. Recommend drilling, 40 feet. She had the second paper under her arm when she went to find Ethan at the fence line. He was working with his back to her, replacing a post with the focused, efficient physicality of a man who has done this task 1,000 times. He didn't hear her coming until she was close. "Ethan." He turned. She held out the paper. He took it, read it again. The color in his face changed slightly, not dramatically, but she was watching carefully, and she saw it. 1868, he said. "Your father commissioned a survey the year he bought the property," she said. "The surveyor found it. Your father noted it. And then for whatever reason, nothing happened." "He didn't have the money to drill," Ethan said slowly. 1868 was the first 3 years on this land were hard, very hard. He lowered the paper. "He always said he was going to come back to it. He said that every year. He never did." "No." Ethan looked at the paper again. "He never did." She let him sit with that for a moment. 40 feet, she said. "That's significant, Ethan. That's not a trickle. That's a real source. If the formation has held for 60 years, and given the soil data I believe it has, what's down there could supply this ranch through 10 droughts." He was looking at the northern field, not at her. She knew what he was weighing. She knew because she could do the arithmetic herself, the cost of drilling against what remained in the ranch account, the risk of being wrong against the near certainty of the creek failing next summer, the possibility of saving everything against the possibility of losing the last of it. She did not push him. "What do you need to think about it?" she said. "Time," he said, "and the numbers." "I can do the numbers tonight." He looked at her. And again the same thing as the night over coffee, that careful, tentative thing that lived in his expression when he looked at her directly. "All right," he said. "Tonight." Bogged. She had the numbers on the table when he came in that evening. She had spent 4 hours on them. She had gone through every financial record she could find in the house. Not intrusively, she had asked his permission, and he had given it, and she had laid out what was there and what was needed and what the margins were. The margins were thin. That was the honest answer. The margins were thin, and the risk was real, and there was no way to dress it up otherwise. She told him so directly when he sat down. "The drilling will cost most of what you have in reserve," she said. "If we're wrong about the source, you'll have 2 months of operating money left. Possibly 3 if you sell the 2 oldest horses." He looked at the numbers. "And if we're right, you have water security through any drought this territory can produce. You expand the grazing capacity by 1/3. You go from surviving to actually building something." She paused. "The numbers only tell you the risk. They can't tell you what's under that field." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something she hadn't expected. "Tell me why you believe it's there." "Not tell me the data, not give me the probability. Tell me why you believe it." She looked at him. "Because the land shows it," she said. "Not just in the records in the actual land. The way the grass grows differently on the north slope. The way the cattle drift. The way the soil holds its color longer into a dry season." She paused. "My father used to say that land tells you everything if you stop talking long enough to listen. I've been listening since I got here." She held his gaze. "It's there, Ethan." He looked at her for a long moment. "You'd stake your reputation on it," he said. "I'd stake my wage on it," she said. "If we drill and I'm wrong, don't pay me for the months I've been here." He straightened slightly. "That's not—" "I'm serious," she said. "I'm asking you to take a risk based on my analysis. That means I carry part of the risk. That's fair." The silence was long. "No," he said finally. "Ethan." "No." His voice was firm, but it wasn't unkind. "I'm not taking your wages on a gamble I choose to make. That's not how I operate." He looked at the numbers again. "But I'll think about it." The thinking took 3 days. 3 days during which the work of the ranch went on fences and cattle, and the kitchen, and the slow, steady accumulation of tasks that a property like this generated endlessly. 3 days during which they fell into a rhythm that neither of them named, but both of them felt. She learned that he woke at 4:30 every morning without fail, and that the first thing he did was check the barn, and the second thing was make the worst coffee in Wyoming. She fixed the coffee situation on the second day by reorganizing his coffee process without comment, and he registered the improvement without comment, and that particular negotiation was conducted entirely in silence, and was, she thought, entirely successful. He learned that she did her best thinking while moving, that she would pace the kitchen when she was working through a problem 3 steps one way, 3 steps back, until something resolved and he stopped coming into the kitchen without checking whether she was in mid-pace, because interrupting it clearly cost her something. She learned that he had a memory for the land that was nearly encyclopedic, that he could describe from memory the condition of any section of the ranch on any given date going back 15 years. A kind of detailed walking knowledge of the property that was unlike anything she had encountered in her father's research circles, where people knew land from data and not from daily lived contact. He learned that she read at night after supper for exactly 1 hour before going to her room, that she had a small collection of books in her bag, that she treated with the careful attention of a person who doesn't own many things that matter, and is very aware of the ones that do. And on the evening of the 3rd day, he came in from the field and said, "Let's drill." She looked up from the book. "You're sure?" she said. "No." He sat down and pulled off his work gloves. "But I've been not sure and doing nothing for 6 years, and it hasn't improved anything." He looked at her. "You're sure?" "Yes." "That's enough," he said. They had the drilling equipment arranged by the following week. It required a trip to town, a joint trip, the first one, which produced exactly the kind of talk that Caleb Dawson had predicted, and that neither Anna nor Ethan paid any particular attention to. What they paid attention to was the hardware store and the drilling arrangements and the conversation with the equipment operator, a leathery, skeptical man named Garrett, who had been drilling wells in Wyoming for 20 years, and who looked at Anna's soil maps with the specific expression of a man who does not believe a woman can read a soil map. She walked him through the data. He was quiet for a moment when she finished. "Your father teach you this?" he said. "Yes." "What was his name?" "William Whitmore. He worked with the Agricultural College in Ohio for 12 years. Garrett scratched his jaw. "I read some of his papers," he said, "when I was starting out." Anna blinked. "That right?" Ethan said beside her. She could hear something in his voice, a very specific, quiet satisfaction. "Good man," Garrett said. "Smart man." He looked at the map again. "I'll have my equipment out there by Thursday." Thursday came and Thursday went, and the drilling began. It was loud and slow and expensive, and every foot of progress cost money that Ethan didn't have much left of, and the town watched. Because of course the town watched. Word had spread in the specifically fast and specific way that small-town word always spreads in Bitter Creek. The fact that Ethan Cole and the rejected Whitmore woman were drilling for water on the North Field was not simply ranch news. It had become a kind of story. The kind of story that people follow with the investment usually reserved for something personal. Margaret Dawson came by once while the drilling was underway. Anna was on the North Field when Margaret's wagon stopped on the road above. She didn't come down to speak. She just sat in the wagon and watched for a while. and then she turned the wagon around and drove back to town. Anna watched her go. Then she turned back to the drilling operation and handed Garrett the next measurement record. 2 days into drilling at 22 feet nothing. Garrett said nothing. He just kept working. Anna reviewed the calculations again that night, checked and rechecked the formation estimate, and went to bed at midnight, still certain. At 29 feet, the drilling slowed. Harder material, Garrett said. Granite shelf. Your formation was right. He glanced at Anna. Your father's daughter all right? And then, at 37 feet, something changed. The sound of the drill changed, deepened, shifted from a dry grinding to something different. Garrett stopped. He put his hand on the casing. Ethan, he said quietly. Ethan was beside her in 3 steps. What is it? Anna said. Garrett looked up at her, and the skepticism was completely gone from his face. Pressure, he said. There's pressure below. The moment stretched. And then from 37 feet underground in the north field of Coal Ridge Ranch, from a source that had been sitting there since before Ethan's father first walked this land, noted and forgotten, and waiting through 60 years of drought and loss, and a grief that had put a wooden box on a shelf, water came up. Not a trickle, not a seep. Water came up with force, the specific surging living force of something that has been under pressure for a very long time and has finally been given a way out. Ethan stood absolutely still. Anna stood beside him and didn't say a word because there was nothing to say. The land had said it. The water was saying it. Everything she had told him was saying it. After a long moment, she felt his hand find hers. Not a romantic gesture, not yet. Not anything so clean or deliberate as that. Just the involuntary reflexive thing that a person does when something enormous happens, and another person is standing beside them, and they need for one moment to hold on to something real. She let him. And then he let go, and they both looked at the water, and Garrett was already calling measurements, and the work was already continuing, because this was a ranch, and there was always work, and the water was real, and the spring was real, and the north field was alive. But she felt where his hand had been for a long time after. That night after Garrett had gone home and the casing was capped and the measurements were recorded, Ethan sat down at the kitchen table and didn't move for a while. She made coffee, good coffee, the way she'd been making it for 2 weeks now, and put a cup in front of him and sat down. Say it, she said. He looked up. Whatever you're thinking, she said. Say it. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then, my father walked that field every year for 30 years, he said. And my grandfather walked it before him. And neither of them. He stopped. It was there the whole time. All of it. The water, the answer. It was there. They didn't have the survey information you had, she said carefully. They could have gotten it. They could have dug for it. They had years. He looked up. I had years. She understood what he was really saying. He wasn't talking only about water. Sometimes, she said quietly, the thing that's going to save us is already there. We're just waiting until we're ready to look at it. She paused. 6 years ago, you weren't ready. He was very still. And now, he said. She looked at him across the kitchen table in the light of a Wyoming evening with the sound of wind off the mountains coming in under the door and the papers from his father's box still spread at the edge of the table and the knowledge of water in the north field sitting between them like something new in the world. Now, she said carefully, I think you might be getting there. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face was different from 5 days ago, from 2 weeks ago. She couldn't name every piece of the difference, but she recognized the part that mattered, the part that looked like a man who had stopped bracing for everything to be taken away. Margaret Dawson sent a message this morning, he said. Before the drilling. Anna waited. She said that if the ranch fails, there are buyers in Cheyenne who'd take the land at a fair price. He paused. She was being kind about it in her way. She thought she was being helpful. And now, the corner of his mouth moved not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. Now, he said, she's going to need a different kind of thing to say. Anna picked up her coffee cup. Outside the north field, sat quiet and enormous in the dark, and 37 feet below its surface, a spring that had been waiting for 60 years was finally completely, irrevocably awake. And in the kitchen, over 2 cups of good coffee, something else, something slower and more careful and more worth waiting for, was beginning to come to the surface as well. The water changed things faster than Anna expected. Not just for the ranch, for the town. Word spread the way. Word always spreads in a place like Bitter Creek. First as rumor, then as confirmed fact, then as the kind of story that people who had nothing to do with it began to feel personally invested in. Garrett the driller told 2 men at the hardware store. Those 2 men told their wives. By the following Sunday, the congregation at the Bitter Creek Methodist Church had a general working knowledge of the Coal Ridge Spring, and by Monday morning, 3 neighboring ranchers had ridden out to see it for themselves. They stood at the edge of the north field and looked at the casing and the runoff channel Anna had designed, a practical thing, a functional thing, directing the overflow toward the eastern pasture where the soil could absorb it. And they were quiet, in the way men are quiet when they are recalculating something significant. Jim Hatcher was the first to speak. He was 50 years old and had run cattle 3 miles east of Coal Ridge for 22 years. And he looked at Anna with the specific expression of a man who is deciding how to say something he has never had occasion to say before. "You find this," he said. "We found it together," Anna said. "She found it," Ethan said from beside her. Flat and factual, no decoration. Hatcher looked at her for another moment. Then he looked at the water. "My south pasture's been dry since August," he said. "Creek feeding it is half what it was last year." "I know," Anna said. "I've seen the creek levels. It's not going to recover next spring. Either the snowpack this year wasn't sufficient." She paused. "If you want, I can look at your property records. See if there's a similar formation." Hatcher looked at her steadily. "You'd do that?" "Yes." "Why?" She thought about it for a moment honestly. "Because the problem is interesting," she said. "And because if the water table is declining across this whole valley, it's not just your problem or ours. It's everyone's problem." Hatcher was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'll bring the records tomorrow." Ethan said nothing until the 3 men had ridden back down the road. Then he turned to her. "You know, if you help Hatcher, the others will come too." "I know. That's a lot of work." "I'm aware." He looked at her sideways. "You're not bothered by it." "Ethan?" She turned to face him. "For 10 years, I hid what I know because the people around me were more comfortable with my silence. I am not doing that anymore." She held his gaze. "If I can help, I'm going to help. That's finished being a question." He looked at her for a long moment, and the thing in his expression that was not quite a smile appeared again. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. They walked back toward the ranch house, and neither of them noticed they were walking at exactly the same pace. The trouble arrived 4 days later, and it arrived in a form Anna had not anticipated. She was in the kitchen working through Hatcher's property records. She had been. Right there was a similar formation possibility on his east boundary when she heard Ethan come in from town faster than usual. Not running. Ethan Cole did not run. But there was a quality to his movement that she had learned to read, and what she read now was controlled urgency. She looked up. He set a folded paper on the table in front of her. She looked at it without touching it. "What is this?" "Letter from the Territorial Land Office," he said. "Came in this morning's post." She opened it. She read it twice. The language was formal and bureaucratic, and dense with official phrasing. But the meaning was clear enough once you stripped away the layers. A claim had been filed against the northern boundary of Coal Ridge Ranch, challenging the original land grant documentation from 1861. The claim asserted that a portion of the north field, specifically the portion containing the spring, had never been properly incorporated into the coal patent. It alleged a surveying error in the original grant, The signature at the bottom of the filing was a land attorney named Harland Cross, operating out of Cheyenne. Anna set the letter down very carefully. "When was this filed?" she said. "2 weeks ago." Ethan's voice was entirely level. "Before we started drilling." She looked at him. Someone knew. Someone knew there was a question about the north boundary," he said. "Or someone created a question about it." He pulled out a chair and sat down. "The original grant from '61, my father's father filed it. The records are in that box." She was already reaching for the box. "Yeah, the original grant document was at the very bottom, wrapped in oilskin that had kept it cleaner than anything else in the box." She spread it on the table and read it with the careful, methodical attention she gave to anything that mattered, and Ethan sat across from her and waited. She found the surveying notation on the 3rd page. She read it. Read it again. Her jaw tightened slightly, an involuntary reaction that she was aware of and couldn't entirely control. "What?" he said. "The original survey marked the north boundary at the seasonal creek line," she said, "which is standard for 1861 grants in this territory, the creek line as it existed then." She looked up. "But the creek has shifted." "How much?" 30 to 40 yards. Over 60 years. She paused. "If someone argues that the boundary follows the current creek line rather than the 1861 creek line, then a strip of the north field, including most of the spring location, falls outside your grant." The kitchen was very quiet. "Is that argument valid?" Ethan said. "It's the kind of argument that can be made," she said. "Whether it's valid depends on territorial precedent and how the land commissioner interprets the original survey intent." She folded her hands on the table. "Who is Harland Cross?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Land attorney out of Cheyenne. I don't know him personally." He paused. "But I know who uses him." She waited. "Gerald Marsh," he said. "He runs the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company. He's been buying up water-adjacent properties across this territory for 3 years." The muscle in his jaw moved once. "He approached me twice last year about buying the north field. I said no both times." Anna looked at the letter, then at the grant document, then at the letter again. "He filed the challenge before we drilled," she said slowly. "Which means he either knew about the spring already from your father's old survey records, if he got hold of them somehow, or he filed a speculative challenge, knowing that the north boundary ambiguity existed, and waited to see what happened." Either way, she agreed, "the timing is not a coincidence." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "What do I need to do?" "You need a land attorney, someone who knows territorial grant precedent." She paused. "And you need the original surveyor's field notes from 1861, if they exist. Not just the grant document, the actual field notes. They'll show the intent of the boundary marking." "Those would be in the Territorial Land Office in Cheyenne." "Yes." He looked at the letter. "I have 60 days to respond to the challenge. Then we have 59 days to find what we need." She met his eyes. "Who do you trust in this territory, legally speaking?" He thought for a moment. "There's a man named Aldous Webb in Laramie. He handled the claim dispute my father had in '73. He's old now, but he knows territorial law better than anyone I'm aware of." "Write to him today," she said. "Today, Ethan, not tomorrow." He stood. "I'll go back to town now." "Wait." She put her hand on the grant document. "Take this with you. Show him the exact boundary language. And take the letter." She paused. "And Ethan, don't tell anyone else about this yet. Not Hatcher. Not anyone in town." He looked at her. "You think it'll get back to Cross?" "I think in a town this size, everything gets back to everyone." She held his gaze. "We need to know what we're working with before anyone else knows we're working." He picked up both documents. At the door he turned. "Anna." She looked at him. "I would have drilled regardless," he said, "of the legal situation. I want you to know that." She understood what he was saying, that the spring was real regardless of who ultimately had legal claim to it. that he had trusted her assessment, and that the assessment had been right, and he was acknowledging both things together. "I know," she said. "Go write the letter." He was back within 2 hours, the letter posted, and a second piece of information in his coat pocket that he hadn't had when he left. He set it on the table in front of her, without a word. It was a page torn from the Bitter Creek Courier, that week's edition which she hadn't seen yet because she had been in the property records all morning. The article was not long. It was on the third page in the lower corner, the specific placement of something a small-town editor thinks is news, but not front-page news. She read it. Miss Anna Whitmore, formerly of Kansas City, and recently arrived in Bitter Creek under circumstances well known to the community, has taken up residence at the Coal Ridge Ranch property north of town. Miss Whitmore's previous engagement to Mr. Caleb Dawson, dissolved at the time of her arrival, has led some residents to question the propriety of the present arrangement. Mr. Ethan Cole, a widower, has employed Miss Whitmore in an unofficial capacity. Community members are encouraged to apply to the Moral and Social Committee if they feel the matter warrants further examination. Anna set the paper down. She was quiet for a moment. Not hurt, past hurt already, but thinking. "Moral and Social Committee," she said. "Margaret Dawson chairs it," Ethan said. "Of course she does." Anna looked at him. "This is two things at once," she said. "The land challenge and this. They may not be connected, but they have the same effect. They put pressure on us from two directions simultaneously. Legal pressure on the property and social pressure on," she paused, choosing the word, "on the situation." "You think Marsh and Margaret are working together?" "I think Gerald Marsh is sophisticated enough to understand that a social scandal weakens our position. A rancher fighting a land claim while also managing a scandal about a woman on his property is distracted, is easier to pressure, is less likely to have the full support of the community when it comes to a legal dispute." She looked at the newspaper again. Whether he coordinated it with Margaret or whether she arrived at it independently, the result is the same. Ethan looked at her. "What do you want to do?" The question was direct and unhesitating, and she registered it in the way she had been registering everything Ethan Cole said for 3 weeks now as the particular variety of respect that operates without announcing itself. "I want to think," she said. "Give me until tonight." She thought. She thought through lunch, and through the afternoon work, and through the early evening, while she helped Ethan repair the South Barn Corner post that had been on the list since her first week. They worked side by side without speaking much, the work doing what physical work does, clearing the surface noise and leaving the underneath visible. What was underneath when she looked at it honestly was this. Gerald Marsh had money and legal standing and 60 days to apply pressure. Margaret Dawson had community influence and a particular investment in ensuring that Anna Whitmore did not establish herself in Bitter Creek as anything other than a cautionary tale. And Anna had a spring she couldn't fully claim, a legal situation she couldn't fully control, and a position in a household that the community had already decided to interpret the worst possible way. What she also had, what nobody in this equation had fully accounted for, was what her father had left her. Not money, not land, knowledge. A specific, documented, professionally established body of knowledge that very few people in Wyoming territory possessed. She held that thought while she drove the last nail into the post. "I want to write to the Agricultural College," she said without looking up from the work. Ethan was beside her. "In Ohio. They have my father's research on file. They have letters establishing my work with him. They have documentation of the methodology we used, the same methodology I used to find your spring." She set down the hammer. "If this goes to a land commission hearing, Harlan Cross is going to argue that the spring is in disputed territory and that Marsh should have access to it. I need to be able to argue that the spring was found through work performed as an employee of Coal Ridge Ranch, using Coal Ridge Ranch records, and that the finding is therefore by any reasonable interpretation inseparable from the ranch's claim to the North Field." Ethan was looking at her. "That's not a legal argument I've ever heard," he said. "It's not a standard one," she agreed. "But the Territorial Land Commission has discretionary power in grant disputes. They don't only look at boundary language. They look at use development improvement of land. She turned to face him. You've been working this land for 6 years. You commissioned the drilling. I found the spring using your family's own records. If Cross wants to argue that Marsh deserves access to something you built, something we built, he's going to need more than a surveying technicality. Ethan was quiet. Write to the college, he said. I will. She picked up her tools. There's something else. Say it. The original survey field notes from 1861. I need to see them in person. The grant document references them, which means they exist in the territorial office in Cheyenne. She looked at him. I need to go to Cheyenne. The silence was significant, not because there was anything improper in the idea, but because they both understood what it meant. It meant money for the trip. It meant days away from the ranch during a critical period. It meant a woman traveling alone to a territorial capital to pull documents from a government office, which was the kind of thing that did not happen without comment in 1885. I'll take you, Ethan said. You can't leave the ranch for that long. Hatcher can watch the stock for 3 days. He owes me from last spring. He looked at her steadily. I'm not sending you to Cheyenne alone to fight a land claim on my behalf. It's practical. Anna. His voice was quiet and final. I'm not sending you alone. She looked at him, and she did something she had not done once in the 3.5 weeks she had been at Coal Ridge Ranch, not on the platform, and not in the kitchen, and not over the maps, and not when the water came up. She let the full weight of what that sentence meant land on her completely. I'm not sending you alone, not as a statement of control, not as a dismissal of her capability, as a statement of, she searched for the exact word, solidarity. Simple, plain solidarity. The kind she had not expected from anyone in Wyoming. All right, she said. We leave Thursday, he said. 'Kay. They left Thursday. The 2 days before departure were the most concentrated work period Anna had experienced since arriving. She wrote the letter to the Agricultural College, wrote a separate letter to Aldous Webb in Laramie, explaining the full situation assembled, every document she could find, relevant to the North Field, and reorganized the spring development records into a form that could be presented formally. Ethan arranged things with Hatcher, packed what was needed, and said almost nothing about any of it. What he did do on the Wednesday evening before they left was come into the kitchen after supper and set a small package on the table beside her. She looked at it. What is this? Open it. She opened it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, new the kind with a proper clasp. For the records, he said. Everything you're finding. It should be in one place, dated in your hand. She looked at the journal, and then at him. That's... She stopped. Started again. Thank you. It's practical, he said. Your name in the records matters. If this goes to hearing, you need to be visible as the person who did the work. She understood exactly what he was doing. He was protecting her claim, not his own hers. He was making sure that when Gerald Marsh's attorney stood in front of a land commissioner and tried to reduce what had happened on the North Field to a lucky accident, there would be a dated, documented, handwritten record showing exactly who had done what and when and how. He was making her visible. She sat with that for a moment. Ethan, she said. Why did you stop me at the train station? He had been on his way back to the shelf with the empty document box, and he stopped, turned, looked at her with the same direct, undecorated attention that she had been trying to fully understand for 3.5 weeks. I told you, he said. You didn't cry. That can't be the whole reason. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something she didn't expect. My wife didn't cry either, when things were hard. He paused. It's not a common quality. The kitchen was very still. I'm not her, Anna said, carefully, not unkindly. I know that, he said equally carefully. I know exactly who you are, Anna. He held her gaze. That's why I stopped you. She didn't have an answer for that, not one she was ready to say out loud. She opened the new journal and picked up her pen and began writing the first entry with the date at the top. November 1885, and the particulars of the original grant challenge. And she was aware of Ethan moving around the kitchen behind her, and she was aware of the specific quality of the silence between them, which was no longer the silence of two strangers who don't know what to say to each other, but the silence of two people who are choosing very carefully how much to say.
Bounty ton.
Cheyenne was loud and crowded and cold, and Anna walked into the Territorial Land Office with her father's research credentials in her bag, and Ethan Cole at her shoulder, and a clarity of purpose that she had not felt since her father was alive. The clerk at the land office was young and skeptical, and looked at her the way young skeptical clerks look at women who come in asking for original survey field notes from 1861. "These records aren't public access," he said. "They are in the context of an active land claim dispute," she said. "Reference number 47-85, filed by Harland Cross on behalf of the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company." She set the challenge letter on the counter. "I'm the primary researcher for the respondent party. I need the original field notes from the Henderson Survey, 1861 Cole patent." The clerk looked at the letter, at her, at Ethan. "I'll need to check with the supervisor," he said. "Please do," she said. The supervisor was a heavy-set woman in her 40s named Mrs. Eleanor Fitch, who came out from the back office with the specific look of someone who has been doing a technical job for a long time and does not have patience for obstruction of legitimate process. She looked at the challenge letter. She looked at Anna's credentials from the agricultural college, the letter she had written on the trip citing her father's work. She looked at the grant document. "Henderson Survey 61, she said. "I know that survey. Henderson was meticulous. His field notes will clarify the boundary intent." She looked at Anna. "You understand what you're looking for." "I understand exactly what I'm looking for," Anna said. Mrs. Fitch looked at her for one long moment. Then, "Come with me." The field notes were in the archive room, and Anna sat at the table with them for 2 hours while Ethan waited outside, and she read every page with the focused total attention of a woman who understands that what she is holding may be the difference between everything and nothing. She found what she needed on page 12. Henderson had been thorough. He had noted in the field notes, not in the summary grant document, but in the actual field notes, the working document, that the north boundary was established by the natural creek alignment as observed in the survey year, with the understanding that seasonal variation and long-term geographic shift do not alter the patent boundary, which is fixed at the time of survey. Fixed at the time of survey, not at the current creek line, at the creek line as it existed in 1861. Which meant that the 30 to 40 yards of creek shift over 60 years, the entire basis of Harland Cross's challenge, was explicitly in the surveyor's own hand, irrelevant to the boundary. Anna sat back. She looked at the page. She read it a third time to be absolutely certain she was not constructing meaning that wasn't there. She was not. She came out of the archive room, and Ethan stood up immediately from the bench where he'd been waiting, and he read her face before she said a single word. "You found it," he said. "Henderson noted it explicitly," she said, and her voice was not quite steady, and she was aware of that and didn't try to fix it. "The boundary is fixed at survey date. Creek shift doesn't affect the patent." She held up the copy she had made with Mrs. Fitch's permission. "Cross's entire challenge rests on the creek movement. Without that argument, he has no case." Ethan was looking at her, and then he did something that surprised her completely. He took the papers from her hands and set them on the bench beside him, and he took both of her hands in his and held them, not a gesture of romance, not yet, not precisely that, but something larger and simpler. The gesture of a man who has been holding himself at a specific controlled distance from another person for weeks, and has finally, in this moment, decided that the distance is not serving either of them. "You did that," he said. "All of it." "We did it," she said. "Anna!" He said her name the way he said things he meant completely. "You came to Wyoming with 2 bags and a broken promise. You saved my spring, my land, and now my legal claim." He paused. "I want you to hear me when I say this." He looked at her directly. You are not the woman who failed at the train station. You never were." Her eyes stung. She did not cry on train platforms in front of crowds. But here in a government archive building in Cheyenne with no crowd, and only one person watching the one person, who had been watching her clearly, since the first day she felt the full weight of it come loose. "Don't," she said, not unkindly. "Not yet." He understood. He let go of her hands slowly and picked up the papers and handed them back. "Tonight," he said, "I'm buying supper at the best restaurant in Cheyenne." "That's not necessary." "It's not necessary," he agreed. "I want to." She looked at him for a moment. Then she straightened, took the papers, and tucked them carefully into her bag. "All right," she said, "but I'm ordering the steak." Something broke open in his face. Not the near smile, not the adjacent to smile, actually broke open fully into something real and warm and utterly unguarded. "You can order two," he said. "Bachak." They were on the road back to Bitter Creek the next morning, the documents secure and the letters dispatched, when Ethan said the thing that changed the architecture of everything that had come before. He said it without turning from the road, without preamble. In the same direct, undecorated way he said everything. "When this is over," he said, "the legal situation, when it's resolved." He paused. "I want to ask you something." She looked at him. "What do you want to ask me?" she said. "Not yet," he said. "When it's over." She looked at the road ahead of them. Wyoming in December, cold and enormous, stretching out in every direction with the specific indifference of land that has been here forever and will be here long after everyone on it is gone. "All right," she said. And the word sat between them, quiet and certain and full of the specific weight of two people who have decided without saying so exactly that they are no longer simply surviving in the same direction. They were riding toward the same place. And Gerald Marsh and whatever was waiting for them back in Bitter Creek did not know yet what he was dealing with. Bitter Creek looked exactly the same when they rode back into it. That was the thing about small towns, they looked the same, regardless of what had changed inside them. The same buildings, the same dirt road, the same three men outside the hardware store who always seemed to be standing there regardless of the time of day or the weather. But something was different, and Anna felt it before she could name it, a quality of attention. The way two women on the boardwalk stopped talking when the wagon passed. The way the hardware store men tracked the wagon without turning their heads. Word had traveled. Of course it had. In Bitter Creek, word always traveled faster than the people carrying it. Ethan drove straight through town without stopping, his eyes forward, his hands easy on the reins. He had the specific quality of a man who has decided that what other people think is information he doesn't need to collect. Anna sat beside him and did the same. They were almost through town when the voice came from the boardwalk. "Ethan Cole." He pulled the wagon to a stop. The man standing on the boardwalk was someone Anna hadn't seen before. Tall, well-dressed in the particular way of a man who wants you to understand immediately that he has money, with a coat that didn't come from anywhere in Wyoming and boots that had never seen a full day's work. He was perhaps 50, with a broad, pleasant face that was doing a great deal of work to appear reasonable. "Mr. Marsh," Ethan said. Anna went very still. Gerald Marsh walked to the edge of the boardwalk and looked up at them both with the relaxed confidence of a man accustomed to being the most powerful person in any conversation he enters. "Didn't know you were heading to Cheyenne," Marsh said pleasantly. "Didn't know I needed to inform you," Ethan said. Marsh smiled. It was a good smile, the kind that had probably opened a great many doors. "I understand there's been some confusion about your north boundary. I want you to know, Ethan, that my attorney's filing was a formality. Nothing personal. These old grant documents are full of ambiguities, and the sensible thing is to get them clarified before they become a problem for anyone." "That's very considerate of you," Ethan said. "I thought so." Marsh's eyes moved to Anna. They took their time. "Miss Whitmore, I've heard a great deal about you." "I imagine you have," Anna said. "I hear you've been doing impressive work out at Coal Ridge. The spring as well, it's quite a discovery." He paused. I wonder if you'd considered that a water source of that magnitude properly developed could benefit the entire valley, not just one ranch. It's going to benefit the entire valley, Anna said. Through the natural runoff system we've already designed. You're welcome to review the plans. Something moved behind Marsh's pleasant eyes. A very brief recalibration. I meant, he said, under unified management. The kind of management that has the capital to develop it properly. Coal Ridge Ranch has the capital to develop it properly, Anna said, and the legal claim, and the documented survey precedent. She held his gaze pleasantly. But thank you for your concern. The silence was short and significant. Marsh looked at Ethan. Think carefully, Ethan. My offer to purchase the Northfield stands. Fair price, no litigation. Everyone goes home satisfied. My answer is the same as the last 2 times you asked, Ethan said. He clicked the reins. Good day, Mr. Marsh. They drove the rest of the way to the ranch in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The silence of 2 people who have just passed a test and both know it and neither needs to narrate it. They were a quarter mile from the house when Anna said, He knows we went to the archive. Yes. Which means someone in the land office told him. Or someone who saw us go in. Ethan's jaw was set. Either way, he knew we'd found something before we got back. That's why he was there. He was trying to settle before the hearing. He was trying to settle because he knows he's going to lose, Ethan said. That's the only reason a man like Marsh offers to settle. She looked at him. You sound certain. He looked back at her. You found the Henderson notes. You told me what they said. I'm certain because you're certain. She sat with that for a moment. The particular weight of being believed completely, without qualification, by another person. She had forgotten how that felt. She wasn't sure she had ever fully known how it felt, actually. Her father had believed in her work, but belief from a parent carries a different gravity than belief from someone who has no obligation to you. No history with you. Someone who simply looked at what you did and said, I believe you. Aldous Webb should have received my letter by now, she said, getting her mind back on the practical ground where it was safer. If he agrees to represent you at the hearing, we need him to have the Henderson notes and the Agricultural College documentation before the commission date. I'll wire him tomorrow. Wire him tonight, she said. Marsh is going to move fast now that he knows we've been to the archive. He'll be looking for another angle. What other angle does he have? She thought about it. The social argument, she said. The moral and social committee. Margaret. Ethan was quiet. He can't use it directly in a land hearing, she continued, but he can use it to undermine your standing in the community before the hearing. Make you make us easier to pressure. Make the commission less sympathetic. She paused. He's a sophisticated man. He doesn't fight on one front. They pulled up to the ranch and climbed down from the wagon, and Ethan stood there for a moment with his hand on the horse's neck, looking at the north field in the distance. My father built this place, he said. 40 years. My grandfather before him. He paused. I've been running it alone for 6 years, and I almost let it die. He looked at her. I'm not losing the north field to a man in a good coat from Cheyenne. You're not, she said. But we need to be smarter than him. We are smarter than him. She almost smiled. Yes, she said. We are. Aldous Webb arrived from Laramie 5 days later, and he was everything Ethan had described. Old, unhurried, with the specific patience of a man who has been practicing territorial law for 40 years and has learned that urgency is almost always a performance and almost never a strategy. He sat at the kitchen table and read every document Anna had assembled, and he read them in order, and he asked questions that were quiet and precise, and when he was finished, he set everything down and looked at Anna with the expression of a man who has just found something unexpected in familiar territory. You organized these, he said. Yes. And you found the Henderson field notes? Yes. And you're not an attorney? No. You should be, he said simply. He turned to Ethan. She's right about everything. The Henderson notation is decisive. Cross has been practicing territorial law for 15 years, and I don't know how he filed this challenge with a straight face, unless he genuinely didn't know about the field notes, which suggests his research was incomplete or he was banking on yours being worse. He tapped the Henderson copy. This ends the boundary argument. What about the rest of it? Ethan said. Webb looked at him. What rest of it? Marsh. He's a sophisticated operator. If the boundary argument falls apart, he moves somewhere else. Webb was quiet for a moment. What do you know about Marsh's other acquisitions in this territory? Anna and Ethan exchanged a look. Not enough, Anna said. Then that's your work before the hearing, Webb said. Because a man who files a challenge he knows is weak isn't using the challenge as his primary strategy. He's using it as a distraction. He looked between them. What's he actually after? The answer came from an unexpected direction, and it came 3 days before the hearing, and it arrived in the form of Jim Hatcher standing at the ranch door at 7 in the morning, with his hat in his hands and an expression Anna had never seen on him before. She opened the door and read his face and called Ethan immediately. Hatcher sat down at the kitchen table, Anna's kitchen table, which had become over the past weeks the place where serious things were discussed, a fact that none of them commented on, and he put a folded document in front of them. Got served yesterday, he said. My east boundary. Same attorney, Harland Cross. Ethan looked at the document. Anna picked it up. It was the same template as the Coal Ridge challenge. The same boundary ambiguity argument. The same formal language, the same Cheyenne Land and Capital Company signature. When did you receive this? Anna said. Yesterday afternoon, Hatcher said. But here's the thing. He leaned forward. Tom Briggs got one too. Same day. And I heard this morning that the Callaway property on the South Ridge got a letter from Marsh's people last week. Not a legal challenge, an offer to purchase. But the letter mentioned that there might be questions about the Callaway grant documentation. He paused. Questions that would be resolved, of course, if the Callaways were interested in selling. The kitchen was very quiet. Anna set down the document. He's not after Coal Ridge, she said. It came out flat, not a question, a conclusion landing. Ethan looked at her. He's after the whole valley, she said. The spring on our north field, the discovery made Marsh realize that the entire valley might be sitting on the same water formation. Multiple properties, multiple springs. If he controls the water rights across this valley. She stopped, looked at Hatcher. How many ranches are we talking about? Hatcher thought. 6, 7 maybe that share this water table. 7 ranches, Anna said. 7 legal challenges or 7 pressured sales, and Marsh controls the water supply for the most productive grazing territory in this part of Wyoming. She looked at Ethan. That's not a land grab, that's infrastructure. He's building a water monopoly. The silence this time was a different quality. It was the silence of people adjusting to a problem that is significantly larger than they thought it was. Webb needs to know this today, Ethan said. Webb needs to know this now, Anna said. She was already standing, already moving toward the writing paper. And so does every rancher in this valley. Hatcher, she turned, can you get word to Briggs and the Callaways today? Tell them to hold on any response to Marsh. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I can do that, Hatcher said. Tell them we're working on something. Are we? Hatcher said. Anna looked at him. Yes, she said. We are. Abab. What they were working on took shape over the next 48 hours, and it was Anna who shaped it, and she shaped it the way her father had shaped solutions, not from the top down, not from theory into practice, but from the actual ground up, starting with what was true and building from there. What was true was this 7 ranching families in the Bitter Creek Valley had independent legal claims to water rights on their individual properties. Those individual claims, challenged one by one, were vulnerable. Any single family isolated facing the legal and financial resources of the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company would struggle. But 7 families with coordinated documentation presenting a unified case at the Territorial Land Commission. 7 families, showing a pattern of coordinated harassment by a single corporate interest that was not a boundary dispute. That was a monopolization case. And the Territorial Commissioner's Office had a mandate embedded in the 1879 Land Act to investigate corporate efforts to monopolize essential resources. She explained this to Webb at the kitchen table, while Ethan and Hatcher listened, and Webb read through the 1879 Act language she had found in a legal compendium she had borrowed from the Bitter Creek courthouse, and he was quiet for a long time. "You found this in the courthouse library," he said. "Yesterday evening," she said. "I was there until they asked me to leave." Webb looked at the relevant passage, then at her. "You've never studied law." "My father's work was frequently in conflict with commercial interests who wanted access to agricultural discoveries," she said. "He learned to document carefully. He taught me the same." She paused. "I know how to read a statute." Webb set down the compendium. "If we bring this before the Commission as a coordinated monopolization case, rather than 7 individual boundary disputes, Cross loses his ability to isolate and pressure each family separately. It becomes a public interest case." He looked at Ethan. "It also becomes significantly more visible. Marsh will fight harder." "Let him," Ethan said. "He has resources." "So do we," Anna said. "We have 7 families who've been working this valley for a combined total of over 100 years. We have a surveyor's field notes that demolish the boundary argument. We have documented evidence of a coordinated filing strategy." She paused. "And we have the spring, which is the thing that started all of this, and which, however Marsh wants to frame it, was found by Coal Ridge Ranch using Coal Ridge records through Coal Ridge labor. That's in the journal. Every date, every calculation, every step." Webb looked at the leather-bound journal, the one Ethan had given her in Cheyenne, sitting at the corner of the table where it always was, now filled with her careful handwriting. "That journal," he said. "Every entry is dated. Every entry," she said. "In my hand with the day's work described in specific terms." He looked at Ethan. "Your father was smart to bring her here." "I'm smart," Ethan said. "My father had nothing to do with it." Hatcher, who had been quiet for most of this, made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one. Anna looked at the table to avoid reacting. "The hearing is in 3 days," Webb said. "I need letters of participation from every family we're bringing in. I need their documentation. And I need Miss Whitmore at the hearing because the spring case is the keystone, and she is the only person who can explain the methodology in a way the commissioner will credit." He looked at her. "Are you prepared to testify?" "Yes," she said. "Cross will challenge you." "I know. He'll try to undermine your credentials, your gender, your—" He paused, choosing carefully, "your situation here." "He can try," she said. "I have my father's published research, the Agricultural College correspondence, 23 pages of dated field notes from the spring discovery, and a surveyor's document from 1861. She looked at Webb steadily. "Let him try." The night before the hearing, Ethan found her on the porch. She was sitting with the journal open, reviewing her notes one final time, and she had been there long enough that the cold had settled into her coat in the particular deep way of Wyoming November nights. He came out and stood beside her, and didn't say anything for a moment. "You should sleep," he said. "I know." "You've read those notes 6 times." "I know that too." She closed the journal. "I'm not nervous about the notes." He sat down. Not across from her, beside her, the way he had taken to sitting at the kitchen table when they were working. Close enough that she was aware of the warmth of him against the cold. "What are you nervous about?" he said. She thought about how to answer that honestly. "Being seen," she said finally. "Tomorrow I'm going to stand in a room and be identified as everything. The rejected bride. The woman living on a widower's property. The woman who claims agricultural expertise." She paused. "Cross is going to try to make the whole case about who I am instead of what I found. And I know how to fight the technical argument. I don't always know how to fight the one about who I am." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you something?" "Yes." "The day I stopped you at the station," he said, "I didn't stop you because you didn't cry. That's what I said, but it wasn't the whole truth." He was looking at the north field in the direction of the spring, though neither of them could see it in the dark. "I stopped you because you were walking away with your head up. Not defiant, not performing bravery, just walking. Like you knew exactly who you were, and you were taking that with you, regardless of what they said back there." He paused. "I hadn't seen that in a long time. I'd almost forgotten it existed." She didn't say anything. "Tomorrow," he said, "you walk into that hearing room the same way you walked away from that platform. You don't have to prove who you are to Harland Cross. You already know who you are." He looked at her. "So do I." The cold was significant, and the dark was complete, and Wyoming pressed in around them from every direction, enormous and indifferent the way it always was. "What was it you wanted to ask me?" she said. "When this is over. You said you had a question." He looked at her. "I'll ask it when it's over," he said. "Ethan?" "Anna." He said it quietly. "Let me ask it properly." She looked at him for a long moment. His face in the dark was the face she had been learning for weeks, the specific architecture of a man who has been alone long enough that he has forgotten certain things and is only now slowly remembering them. "All right," she said. She went inside. She slept. And in the morning she dressed carefully. Not her best dress, not the pressed dress from the train platform, but a working dress, clean and practical. The dress of a woman who has work to do, and she went to the kitchen and made coffee for the last time before the hearing. The Bitter Creek Town Hall had never held this many people. 7 ranching families, their wives in several cases. Aldous Webb, precise and unhurried. Harland Cross, who was younger than Anna, had imagined sharp-faced and well-prepared with 2 associates and a leather case full of documents. Gerald Marsh himself, seated at the back with the particular stillness of a man who has arranged for others to fight his battles and is waiting to see the outcome, and Margaret Dawson. Seated in the 3rd row, spine straight, hands folded, watching Anna with an expression that had changed subtly since the platform at the train station, not softer exactly, but more complicated. The expression of a woman who has been revising an opinion against her own preference and has not yet decided what to do about it. The commissioner was a compact businesslike man named Hargreaves, who had heard a great many land disputes and had the brisk efficiency of someone who intends to hear a great many more. He called the session to order. Cross went first. He was smooth and well-organized, and his boundary argument was presented with the precision of genuine legal expertise. He cited surveys. He cited the Creek movement. He cited comparable cases. He was good. Anna watched him and registered that he was very good and filed that information away and did not let it touch her composure. Webb's response was methodical and complete. The Henderson field notes. The explicit language about the boundary being fixed at survey date. The Agricultural College documentation establishing Anna's methodology. And then the larger argument. The pattern of filings. The coordinated timing. The 1879 monopolization statute and its direct application to what the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company was doing across 7 properties. Cross objected. Webb was ready for every objection. And then Commissioner Hargreaves looked at the documentation and said, "I'd like to hear from Miss Whitmore directly." She stood. Cross was on his feet before she reached the front of the room. "Commissioner, I'd like to note for the record that Miss Whitmore is not a licensed professional in any capacity relevant to this proceeding." "Your note is recorded," Hargreaves said. "Sit down, Mr. Cross." Cross sat. Anna stood at the front of the room with the journal in her hands and the Henderson notes beside her and the full attention of every person in the town hall on her face. She thought about the platform. She thought about the pressed dress and the travel bag and Caleb's face at the middle distance. Then she put that away. She opened the journal to the first entry. On November 3, 1885, she said, I reviewed the original property documentation at Coal Ridge Ranch. The following is a technical summary of the water formation analysis I conducted over the subsequent 4 weeks, including the methodology, the data sources, and the specific reasoning that led to the identification of the spring. She spoke for 22 minutes. She was not performing. She was not defending herself. She was explaining what she had found and how she had found it in plain, precise technical language that did not leave room for ambiguity or misinterpretation. And she looked at Commissioner Hargreaves when she spoke, and not at Harlan Cross, and not at Gerald Marsh in the back row. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Cross stood again. "Commissioner, I'd like to cross-examine." "On what grounds?" Hargreaves said. "On the grounds that this testimony has not been established as credible. The Henderson Field notes have been established as credible." Hargreaves said, "They're an official Territorial Land Office document. Miss Whitmore's analysis of them either holds up or it doesn't. Mr. Cross, do you have a specific technical objection to the methodology she described, or are you objecting to the person who described it?" The silence was the loudest thing in the room. Cross looked at his papers. "I have no further questions," he said. "Or." Hargreaves called a recess. He came back 40 minutes later and delivered his ruling in the flat, efficient language of a man who writes rulings for a living and has no interest in drama. The boundary challenge against Coal Ridge Ranch was dismissed. The Henderson Field notes were definitive. The boundary was fixed at the 1861 survey date. Gerald Marsh's claim to any portion of the North Field was without legal basis. Furthermore, the Commissioner's office was opening a formal investigation into the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company's filing pattern across the Bitter Creek Valley under the provisions of the 1879 Land Act. All property transactions involving Harlan Cross on behalf of the company were suspended pending investigation. Marsh left before the Commissioner finished speaking. Cross gathered his papers with the controlled calm of a professional who is not going to show what he is feeling in a public room, and he left too. And then the room was full of ranching families who had been holding their breath for 3 days, and Hatcher was shaking Webb's hand, and someone in the back was saying something that might have been a cheer if Wyoming ranchers were the kind of people who cheered in public, which most of them were not. Ethan was beside her. She was aware of him before she turned to look, aware of the particular quality of his presence, which she had learned the way you learn things you will need to know for a long time. She turned. His face was doing something complicated. The full, unguarded expression she had seen once in Cheyenne when she ordered the steak, except larger than that, deeper than that. "Well," he said. "Well," she said. "It's over," he said. She looked at him. Her heart was doing something specific, something she hadn't let it do since the train platform in Kansas City when she had read Caleb's last letter and decided to trust it. "You said you had a question," she said. He reached into his coat pocket. What he took out was small and plain, a ring, silver simple, the kind of ring a Wyoming rancher buys when he has made up his mind clearly and doesn't need decoration to say what he means. He held it in his palm between them. He didn't go to one knee. He was not a theatrical man. He stood in front of her in the Bitter Creek Town Hall with ranching families around them and the echo of the Commissioner's ruling still in the air, and he looked at her directly. "Anna Whitmore," he said, "you came to this territory as a stranger. You saved my spring and my land and my legal claim and approximately 6 years' worth of my belief that things could still be worth building." He paused. "I don't need a wife. I want you. There's a difference, and I think you know the difference better than anyone." He held her gaze. "Will you stay? Not because you have nowhere else to go. Because you want to." She looked at the ring. She looked at him. In the third row, Margaret Dawson was watching. Anna could feel it. She didn't look. She kept her eyes on the man in front of her, the man who had stopped her on a platform when no one else would, who had given her a journal to make her work visible, who had driven to Cheyenne and waited on a bench without complaint, who had said, "I'm not sending you alone," with the simplicity of a man who means every word he says. "You told me," she said quietly, "that you knew exactly who I was." "I do," he said. "Then you know." She said, that I'm going to say yes." He put the ring on her finger. And from the third row, Margaret Dawson made a sound that was not quite approval, but was as close to it as that woman was ever likely to get. And Hatcher made a sound that was definitely approval, and Webb said something quiet and legal sounding that nobody paid attention to. Ethan Cole looked at Anna Whitmore with the look of a man who has come back from a long way away. "Be mine," he said quietly. "Just the two of them." "Already am," she said. The ring was real. Anna knew this because she looked at it every morning for the first week after the hearing. Not with the anxious checking of a woman who needs to confirm something might disappear, but with the quiet recognition of a person who has received something they had stopped believing was coming and is still adjusting to the weight of it on their hand. It was a plain ring, silver simple. She had not wanted anything else. The morning after the hearing, she woke at 4:30 without being conscious of deciding to, and she lay in the small room off the back of the ranch house. Her room still, because they had agreed that certain things would wait until after a proper wedding. And Ethan Cole was among everything else. He was a man of his word, and she listened to the sounds of the ranch settling around her and thought about the specific, unlikely sequence of events that had brought her to this particular morning. 1,100 miles. 4 days on a hard bench seat. A pressed dress. A platform in the cold. "You are not what my son expected." She held her hand up in the dark and looked at the ring. "No," she thought. "I suppose I wasn't." Ethan was already in the kitchen when she came out, and he had made the coffee, good coffee, because she had reorganized his process months ago, and it had stuck, and he looked up when she came in with the particular look he had taken to giving her since Cheyenne. Not new exactly. She had seen versions of it since the first week, but clearer now, unguarded in a way that meant he had stopped managing it. "You're thinking about something," he said. "I'm always thinking about something." "The hearing's done," he said. "The land claim is dismissed. You're allowed to stop working for approximately one morning." "I'm not working," she said. She sat down and pulled the coffee toward her. "I was thinking about Margaret Dawson." He looked at her. "She didn't say anything," Anna said. "Yesterday, after the ruling, she looked at us and she didn't say anything." "That's not unusual for Margaret." "It is unusual," Anna said. "Margaret Dawson always has something to say. The fact that she didn't—" She paused, thinking it through. "I want to go see her." Ethan set down his cup. "Why?" "Because she's going to keep being part of this town," Anna said. "And I'm going to keep being part of this town. And we can either spend the next 20 years in a Cold War, or we can, I don't know, establish something real." She looked at him. "I'm not asking her permission. I'm not apologizing for existing. I just want to look at her directly and let her look at me directly without a crowd between us." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "You know she might not receive you." "I know. She might say something difficult." "She's already said difficult things to me on a public platform," Anna said. "Whatever she says in her parlor will be an improvement." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, "I'll drive you. I can go alone." "I know you can," he said. "I want to drive you." Gee. Margaret Dawson received them. That was the first surprise. Anna had half expected to be turned away at the door to have the housekeeper return with regrets and the specific social closure of a woman who has decided a situation does not merit her attention. But the door opened, and the housekeeper said Mrs. Dawson would see them in the parlor, and they went in. Margaret was seated when they entered. She did not stand. But she looked at Anna with the full direct attention that Anna had come to understand was Margaret's version of respect. She didn't offer it casually. She watched you completely, and she let you see her watching. "Miss Whitmore," she said. Then, with a slight adjustment, "I suppose that will be changing shortly." "Mrs. Cole eventually," Anna said. "Not yet." Margaret looked at Ethan. "Sit down, both of you." They sat. There was a silence that had the quality of preparation. The silence before someone says something they have been deciding whether to say for some time. "I owe you an accounting," Margaret said. Anna waited. What I said at the station was not entirely wrong in its intent, Margaret said. She had the precision of a woman who does not apologize loosely. My son was not ready to marry. He hasn't been ready for anything beyond what his father and I have arranged for him, and that is its own failure, and mine in particular. She paused. But the manner of it was wrong. I said what I said in a manner that was designed to wound, and I said it publicly. And that was cruelty. I don't use that word lightly. Anna looked at her. I'm not asking you to forgive it, Margaret said. I'm asking you to hear that I know what it was. The parlor was very quiet. I hear it, Anna said. Thank you. Margaret looked at her for another long moment. Something in her face was doing the slow, effortful work of revision, the work of a woman who has held a position for a long time and is moving it by inches. You saved 6 families in this valley, she said, including the Hatcher family whose ranch adjoins mine and whose water situation I have been aware of and concerned about for 2 years. She paused. I did not know what to do about it. You did. My father taught me what to look for, Anna said. Your father taught you well, Margaret said. And you had the sense to use it. She looked at Ethan. She's not what I expected, Ethan. No, Ethan said. She never was. Margaret's chin lifted slightly, not the cold judgment of the platform, something different. See that you deserve her, she said. Ethan looked at Margaret Dawson, and Anna saw something in his face that she hadn't seen there before in anyone else's presence, a kind of acknowledgement. Not submission. Acknowledgement. I intend to spend considerable time on that, he said. Caleb Dawson came to the ranch the following week. Anna was in the north field reviewing the spring runoff channel when she heard the horse, and she turned and saw him coming alone. No associates, no his mother's wagon, just Caleb on a bay horse, looking like a man who has been practicing what to say and is no longer confident in any of it. She waited. He pulled up and climbed down and stood with his reins in his hand and looked at her with the expression she had seen on him at the station, in the road outside the ranch, in every encounter they'd had since her arrival, that specific, uncomfortable combination of regret and self-awareness and the inability to do anything useful with either. Anna, he said. Caleb, I heard about the hearing. He looked at the spring casing the runoff channel, the stakes she had driven to measure the water distribution. I heard what you did. She waited. I came to say... He stopped. Started again. I was a coward at the station. There's no other word for it. You deserved better, and I knew it, and I stood there anyway. He looked at her directly now, and whatever it cost him, she could see it was real. I'm sorry, Anna. Not for the outcome. I think the outcome was right for both of us. But for the way it happened, for what I let my mother say, and didn't stop. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the 8 months of letters, about the sentence she had loved the land here, is honest. It doesn't ask you to be anything except what you are. She thought about the fact that Caleb had written that which meant some part of him had believed it, which meant that somewhere under the cowardice and the mother's shadow, there was a man who understood something true. He had just never been able to live up to what he understood. I accept your apology, she said. And Caleb, I want you to hear something. He looked at her. You were right that the outcome was right, she said. Not because I wasn't enough, and not because there was something wrong with me, but because you weren't ready for someone who wasn't going to make herself smaller to fit your life. She paused. That's not a cruelty, that's just true. And I think somewhere you knew it. He was quiet. Yeah, he said. I think I did. She held out her hand, the hand with the plain silver ring. I'm going to marry Ethan Cole, she said. And I'm going to keep working this land. And I'd appreciate it if you and I could exist in the same town without it being a difficulty for either of us. He looked at her hand, looked at the ring, then looked up at her with the expression of a man who understands fully, and finally, the specific nature of what he passed up. Congratulations, he said. It was genuine. She could hear it was genuine. "Thank you," she said. He rode away, and she turned back to the spring. And she did not feel triumphant, and she did not feel sad. She felt what she had been learning to feel over the past months steadily, and without drama settled. Like a woman who has found the exact ground she was built to stand on. The wedding was in December. Not a large affair. Anna had no family to invite, and Ethan's was reduced to a few cousins in the Eastern Territories who couldn't make the distance in winter. But the Bitter Creek community came because communities always come to weddings, and because this particular wedding had the quality of a story that people had been following with investment and wanted to see to its conclusion. Aldous Webb was there, dry and satisfied in the way of a man whose work concluded well. Jim Hatcher was there with his wife, who pressed Anna's hand at the door and said simply, "My east pasture is already showing better moisture. Thank you." 3 other Valley families were there, ranchers who had attended the hearing and whose land challenges had been suspended and who had started looking at Anna with the particular expression of people reassessing what they thought they knew. Margaret Dawson was there. She sat in the second row, spine straight, hands folded, and when Anna walked to the front of the room in a dress that was not the pressed dress from the train platform, but something new made from fabric, she had chosen herself without anxiety because she was not trying to look like something she wasn't. Margaret Dawson watched with an expression that was not warm exactly, but was something real, something that had been revised from what it was on the platform and was still slowly revising. Ethan stood at the front of the room and watched Anna walk toward him, and he had the look on his face that she had first seen fully in the Cheyenne restaurant, open and unguarded and real. The look of a man who has stopped bracing for everything to be taken from him. The vows were plain. They were the vows of 2 people who had been through enough to know that promises mean exactly what they say, and not a word more, and who were prepared to mean every word. When it was done, Ethan looked at her. "Mrs. Cole," he said, quietly, just to her. "Mr. Cole," she said. And in the second row, Margaret Dawson made a sound that Anna would describe to Ethan later as being approximately 60% of the way to approval, and Ethan said that was probably the closest Margaret had come to approving of anything in 30 years, and Anna said that was good enough. The investigation into the Cheyenne Land and Capital Company produced results by spring. Aldous Webb had filed the monopolization case with the Territorial Commission in January, and by March, the investigation had expanded beyond Bitter Creek to 2 other valleys where Marsh's company had been operating with the same coordinated pressure strategy. The Territorial Governor's office became involved. Harlan Cross withdrew from the case in February, citing a conflict of interest, which was the legal profession's way of saying he could read the direction of the wind. Gerald Marsh himself came to Bitter Creek one final time in April. Anna was working at the kitchen table, the same table where everything had happened, where the maps had been spread, and the documents reviewed, and the decisions made when Ethan came in and said Marsh's wagon was on the road. She set down her pen. "He's not coming to the ranch," Ethan said. "He stopped at the Hatcher place. I saw from the north field." "What does he want?" "Hatcher sent him away." Ethan sat down. "Word came from Webb this morning. The commission ruled on the coordinated filing pattern. Marsh has been formally censured. He can't operate in this territory for 5 years." She looked at him. "It's done," he said. She sat with that for a moment. The specific quality of an ending not triumphant because she had never needed triumph. Just finished. Resolved. The way a wound finishes when it has properly closed. "Your father's spring," she said. "Our spring," he said. She looked at him. "Our spring," she agreed. But by the following autumn, Coal Ridge Ranch was unrecognizable as the struggling, failing property Anna had first walked 6 months before. Not unrecognizable to those who knew it. The bones were the same. The land was the same. The work was the same daily work that Ethan had always done. But the thing that had been failing was no longer failing. The water from the spring had been distributed through a channel system that Anna and Ethan had designed together over the winter, and the eastern pasture that had been dry for 2 years was running, and the cattle weight was up. And the grazing rotation Anna had adjusted in her first week was producing results that Hatcher and 2 other ranchers had adopted on their own properties. People came to the ranch now, not as spectators, as colleagues. Ranchers with questions about water and soil and grazing. Wives with questions about the kitchen garden methods Anna had developed. A young man from the Territorial Agricultural Office who had heard through channels about the spring discovery and the methodology behind it, and who arrived one afternoon with a notebook and the look of someone who has been sent to verify something his supervisor didn't entirely believe. Anna sat with him at the kitchen table and explained the methodology step by step with the same calm precision she had used at the hearing, and he took notes and asked good questions, and at the end he looked up and said, "The Agricultural College in Ohio has been working on a water table survey for the Western Territories. This work, what you've documented here, it fits directly into what they're trying to do. Would you be willing to contribute?" She looked at him, at the notebook, at the question. "Yes," she said. "I would." After he left, Ethan found her still at the table looking at the journal full, now the last pages reaching the edge of what the binding could hold. "You're going to need a new one," he said. "I'm going to need several," she said. She looked up at him. "The Territorial Agricultural Office wants to include the spring methodology in their Western survey." He sat down. It means the work gets used," she said. "Not just here, across the territory, other ranches, other water problems, other families who don't know what's under their land yet." She paused. "My father spent 15 years building that research, and then he died, and I spent 10 years keeping it small because keeping it small was safer." She looked at the journal. "I'm done keeping it small." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "You are absolutely done with that." The letter from Kansas City arrived in November one year, almost exactly from the day Anna had boarded the train west. It was from her aunt, the same aunt who had sat across a kitchen table and told Anna to be practical about what she was and what she was not. The letter was short. Her aunt had heard from a friend of someone connected to the Territorial Agricultural Office that Anna was working in Wyoming. The letter didn't say much. It asked cautiously how she was. Anna sat with the letter for a while. Then she wrote back. She wrote 2 pages. She wrote about the spring and the hearing and the Valley families and the Agricultural Office survey. She wrote about Ethan plainly and without performance, about a man who had handed her a journal to make her work visible, who had said, "I'm not sending you alone," who had asked her to stay, not because he needed something from her, but because he wanted a life with her. She wrote, "You told me to be practical about what I was and what I was not. I have been nothing but practical since I came west. It turns out what I am is considerably more than either of us knew." She sealed the letter and gave it to Ethan to post in town, and she didn't think about it again. The twist that nobody in Bitter Creek had anticipated came in December on the 1-year anniversary of the wedding. It came in the form of a letter from Aldous Webb, which arrived on a Tuesday morning, and which Ethan read first, because he was at the table when it came, and which he set down very carefully, with an expression that made Anna stop what she was doing and come to read it over his shoulder. Webb had been contacted by the Territorial Governor's Office. The spring at Coal Ridge Ranch and the methodology used to locate it had been cited in a formal report submitted to the governor on water resource management in Wyoming Territory. The report recommended the establishment of a Territorial Water Survey Office, staffed by qualified researchers charged with identifying and documenting water resources across the territory before corporate interests could move on them. The report recommended Anna Cole as the founding researcher of that office, not as a consultant, not as an assistant to a qualified man, as the founding researcher, by name. She read it twice. Ethan was watching her. "It's unpaid to start," she said. Her voice was entirely steady. "Webb's note says the governor's office intends to fund it properly by spring," he said. The report was well received. "It's a territorial office," she said. "It would require travel, significant travel at certain times of year. I'm aware." The ranch is in better shape than it's been in 20 years, he said. "Hatcher knows the operation. The spring is stable. The grazing rotation runs itself at this point. He looked at her directly. Anna. She looked at him. Your father built knowledge for 15 years and died before he saw what it became, he said. You've been carrying it since then. You brought it here, and you used it, and it saved this land and 5 other families. He paused. If the territory wants to put that knowledge to work on a larger scale, you don't look at me to see if it's permitted. You already know the answer. She looked at the letter. It's what he would have wanted, she said quietly. Not about the governor, not about the ranch. About her father. It's what you want, Ethan said. That's enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll need a better filing system. He almost laughed. It came out as the full real thing she had first seen in Cheyenne. Not the near smile, not the adjacent to smile, but the actual laugh of a man who is genuinely unexpectedly delighted. I'll build you one, he said. She wrote to the governor's office that afternoon and accepted. And then she did something she had not done in 11 months. She went to the north field alone to the spring casing, and she stood there in the December cold, and she let herself feel the full weight of the year that had passed. The platform, the crowd. You are not what my son expected. The 2 bags, the stranger's voice. I ain't offering pity. The kitchen table and the maps and the coffee and the moment the water came up, and Ethan's hand finding hers, and the ring in his palm in the town hall, and the letter on the table this morning, with her name in it, her name Anna Cole, founding researcher by the authority of the territorial governor of Wyoming. She looked at the spring. Her father had walked fields like this his entire life, looking for what was underneath what the land was holding that nobody had thought to ask for yet. He had taught her to look the same way, to stop talking and listen to what was there. She had listened. And what she had found was not only water. She heard Ethan's boots behind her. She didn't turn. She knew his footstep the way she knew her own. He came and stood beside her in the cold, and they were quiet together for a while. The way people are quiet together when the silence is full rather than empty. I keep thinking about something, she said. Tell me. The day on the platform, she said. If Caleb had been a different man, if he had stepped forward and defended me and sent his mother home, if none of what happened had happened. She paused. I would have married him. I would have been a ranch wife in Bitter Creek, and I would have made it work, and I would have hidden everything my father taught me because it made people uncomfortable. She looked at the spring, and I would have been kind and decent and completely invisible for the rest of my life. Ethan was quiet. Being sent back, she said. Being the failed bride. That morning, I thought it was the worst thing. I thought it was the end of something. She paused. It was the beginning of everything. He turned to look at her. Anna, he said. She turned. He was looking at her with the full, open, unguarded look, and she had been learning the language of his face for a year now, and she read it completely. I know who you are, he said. It was the same thing he had said in the town hall. The same thing he had said on the porch in the dark. The same sentence repeated, because some sentences contain the whole of a thing and don't need to be replaced. I know who I am, she said, and that was the difference. That was the whole of it in 5 words. 12 months ago on a platform in a pressed dress she had not known. She had known what she could do and what she had learned and what her father had taught her, but she had not known in the place where it had to be known to matter who she was. She knew now. She was Anna Cole. She was a rancher's wife and a founding researcher and a woman who had read a water table in old documents and found a spring in dying land. She was the daughter of a man who spent his life listening to what the earth was trying to say. She was the woman who had walked away from a public humiliation with her head up, not because she was performing bravery, but because she already knew somewhere underneath the fear that none of those people were the ones who got to define her. She had just needed a place where that knowledge could be true out loud. She had needed a man who already saw it. She had needed a spring in a north field and a wooden box full of old papers and a kitchen table where decisions were made and remade and made again until they held. Ethan reached out and took her hand, the one with the plain silver ring, and held it in both of his the way he had in Cheyenne, simply and completely without ceremony. They stood together in the cold Wyoming December, above the spring that had saved everything, and the land spread out around them, enormous and patient, and full of what it was still holding, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Somewhere in the territory, 6 other ranching families were running water through channels built on Anna's methodology. Somewhere in Cheyenne, a governor's report with her name in it was sitting on an official desk. Somewhere in Kansas City, her aunt was reading a letter that said, "I am considerably more than either of us knew." And somewhere in Bitter Creek, Margaret Dawson was revising. Still revising slowly, by inches, the story she had told herself about a woman who arrived on a train with 2 bags and a broken promise, and turned out to be the most consequential person to set foot in that valley in a generation. Anna Cole looked at the land that was hers, and the man who was hers, and the work that was hers, and the name that was hers, fully and without apology. The woman they sent back as a failed bride had not failed at anything. She had simply not yet arrived at the place where who she was could be seen clearly, and the moment she did everything that was waiting for her had recognized her at once. She had been enough the entire time. She had just needed the right ground to stand on, and she was standing on it now.